All right, hello everyone. I'm just going to leave it a few moments so that people's Zooms can get start up and they get joined, and then we'll get going. Um, Hope you're all doing well. Initial joiners. Right. Okay. So I think get started now. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. So today is the second in a series of 3 webinars that we're doing on the topic of speed in the end-to-end sales process. If any of you were here for last week's episode, welcome back. For anyone who wasn't, last week we talked about the quoting process. So that was all about providing the quality, accuracy, overall details, customer experience, and of course speed when it comes to delivering quotes to your customers. Today, we're moving on to the topic of communication. So I'll be handing over to Vish Kumar shortly to take you through our presentation about that topic. Before we do that, though, we will be taking questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So if you go down to the bottom of your Zoom console, you should see a Q&A button. If you have any questions at any point throughout the presentation, please post your question and we'll try to get to it before the end. But yeah, so let me introduce you to the presenter for this webinar, Vish Kumar. Vish is our VP of Industry Solutions, and he's had an illustrious career in the telecommunications industry. Worked as the GM for credit fraud and payments at Telstra, spent 12 years in various roles at Optus, and throughout his career has worked across the full spectrum of telecommunications, including VNOs, wholesale, SMBs, and in the B2B and B2C spaces. So you're in good hands. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Vish. And yeah, so Vish, take it away.
Thanks, Ed. And thank you everyone for having me again tonight, or today, wherever you are in the world. So today there's some key things we want to cover. I want to cover things around communication and the speed that's related to communication and how we make things a lot better for you, your businesses, but then also really explore some of the key topics that are in the market today. So we'll look at some of the overviews and challenges that we're facing right across the world and right across the spectrum, especially within the carrier market, or the CSP market. So what are technologies doing to make it harder, but it's also difficult at the same time? What are the customer demands and how are we meeting them, and what are we doing differently with them, and how do they really interact? And B2B telcos, people want to feel important, but how do we really solve that balancing act when something does go wrong and something isn't quite going to plan? Communication, it should be very simple, but there are some challenges that we face both in different areas. So around technology, and what are some of those barriers we face into? What are the process barriers we look at? And what are some of the things that could be just our blind spots that we're not really aware of? And then people and culture. So we've talked about people and culture in the quoting side of things, but it's also relevant to our communication and ensuring that we look at that as well. And then is there a way forward to meet our customer demands? And how do we really solve that with technology, and then also our people and process side of things, to ensure that we meet them to an expectation where we can actually keep our experience up? So jumping into it, and like we mentioned before with the quoting side of things, customer experience is everything, and it should be at the heart of everything we do, especially for our customers. Ensuring that we're giving them the best possible service. Communication becomes a very, very big part of that, because that's how they hear when something goes wrong. It's also how they hear or feel when something's about to be delivered, or it's something that's going to impact their business that they've been waiting for a really long time. And your solution does provide that. So it's extremely important that, we look at the processes, we look at everything to do within that particular episode, or the NPS that we're looking at that point in time, and how do we really communicate to make it effective? Some of the key things that really make it effective is about personalizing it. So how do you personalize that particular point or that particular episode you're looking at, and making sure that communication is relevant to the business, also relevant to the role, the persona that you're talking to, and keeping it extremely simple. Now, simplicity seems simple, but it actually is quite difficult to keep a technical conversation simple, or even something you're asking them to do extremely simple. So especially when we look at the delivery scenarios of complex fixed, you may be asking them to do something that is semi-technical and going to a certain place to be ready for something, but we have to try and keep that simple to ensure that when we do get the task done, or we need the task to be done, there are no complications, and the customer feels that it was seamless and it was easy all the way through. So the current challenges we're looking at right now is we've seen technology change over the years, and it's changed fundamentally in the way that we communicate with our customers. I remember a time when we were looking at, just when we would look at delivery communications, we're all done via phone. So we would call the customer and say, just so you know, this is where we're at. And we would build that relationship really simply and really quickly to say, I spoke to Joe, who was the office manager, and we're talking about the internet delivery. So I gave her an update, and she said that she's okay with the fact that the particular technician, he's going to come out next week. He can't give me an exact time, but he will call her 30 minutes before, and she's scheduled it in her own calendar. So those conversations were they were great to have with a customer. They were personalized and they were really simple. However, they cost us a lot of money internally as a carrier, because I would only have one agent looking after maybe 5 or 6 customers. What technology has also enabled us is now to say, well, there's different ways we can communicate with our customers. We could automate some of this stuff, but it also means that the customer has choices. They have choices in terms of what are those technology methods that we really want to absorb or accept communication. There's different ways that we've got to do it. There's different technology mediums that we've got to use. So it could be SMS, it could be email, or it could still be phone calls or even voice messages that we pass out to customers in different platforms. But then also technology has a level of automation that we can work through as well, to how do we make that all work together and make sure that, one, it's being delivered, and two, we know the customer's satisfied with it. So it does make some things easier, but it also does make some things extremely hard to really work through and understand where are we going and what are we doing and how do we keep track of it all. Also, as we look at the technology, we also know that customers become really, really accepting to the fact that, things can be done here and now, and I don't need to wait for Joe to call me, or me to call Joe, and for Joe to call me back. It can be done, and the demands have changed. So they expect instant responses, but they also expect, when they interact with you as a business, that everybody knows what's going on with them. There's a level of transparency and just simplicity that should be there to say, well, I spoke to your call center, you as my delivery manager or you as my salesperson, you should already know what that conversation was about. You should also know what challenges I'm also facing, and you should be able to predict also what's going on and be able to guide me on what my next steps should be. A level of sentiment should be able to be taken through that actual communication to see if I'm happy, sad, grumpy, or I'm not overall satisfied with what I'm doing and how I'm doing things. But as the B2B market becomes more complex, there's a level of proactivity that's expected from the carrier, but there's also a level of understanding the complexity of the overall business landscape that's also expected. So customers are expecting support, even though they're supporting a hybrid work, so allowing people to work from home, but then also in the office. And they're expecting mediums to be able to support this as we go through. So the demand is not only complex by the technology we need, but it's also because customers expect you to understand what they're going through and have a level of understanding of how the business is really operating. And those challenges come from some of the solutions we offer because we allow that flexibility. And we just haven't adopted to the way that we should communicate with customers that do have a flexible workforce, that do work at different times, but then also expect different mediums to have communications with them. But well, one thing that hasn't changed, a lot of it is, especially when we deal with B2Bs, they all want to feel important. Now, it's not a level of entitlement. It's a level of saying, well, my business is extremely important to me, and I need you to share that same level of importance and understanding. They're actually asking for a level of empathy. They're asking you to understand the challenges that they're facing when something does go wrong or if there is a delay. What they're asking for is a level of, can you help me and what can you do for me to get me up and running so my business isn't impacting me today? Because their margins could be tight, their livelihoods on the line. There is a level of growth they're going through that they want to try and maintain. But any disruption to the business, whether it's delays on a particular service being delivered, or there's an outage within the network or within something going on with your particular carrier, it's a level of communication that they actually expect, but they also expect it to be personalized and tailored to basically the impacts of their business. So a clear scenario is if there was an outage in the network, it would be a message going out to them proactively to say, we understand there's something going on with our network, we're investigating it. We also have a message around what's going on for your business. We understand it could be a trialing time for your business. We understand this is not the best thing going through. However, we're working on it. If there's anything absolutely urgent, please contact our contact center on this particular number, or we will proactively call you. That's the sort of level of responses customers really want. Now, whether that's available within your carrier or within your business, it's a different story. But using the technology and then also using different methodologies can help with that. But understanding the real requirement of that personalization, but then also making them feel important is really key to making sure that you can reduce the number of escalations, but then also give them a level of comfort to say what's going to happen next and that you're actually taking their business quite seriously. Communication, it can be simple, but it is really challenging in the current environment just to get it right. When we look at everything across the board as a whole, we understand the commercial pressures within every carrier. We understand the need to make money and the need to have decent profit margins are still very important, but not at the cost of customers. And that's a very, very fine balancing act that we've all got to work through to make sure that we get it right, but we also solve the customer experience, the customer demands, and also the way that they want to interact with us. So technology does help, and as we've explored, it does have some pitfalls, but it can also form some significant barriers within the way that you interact with your customers and also the way that you communicate with them to make it meaningful and also relevant to them, to what they're going through, should there be an outage or in their delivery process. So some of the mediums of communicating with a lot of the B2B customers, the most common ones are email, push notifications through the app, or could even potentially be SMSs. And these are the most common ones we see right the way through the B2Bs that we work with. But they also pose some significant challenges because they may not be personal enough to the person that you're actually dealing with. And if you're dealing with multiple people within the business, personalizing them can be cumbersome and can also be challenging. But the other is also, how do you make that proactive and seamless right the way through, knowing that different people in the organization that you're working with have different preferences on the types of communications, but then also when they want to be communicated. So if it's during the day, during the evening, or in the afternoon. Now, assuming B2B is generally 9 to 5 is what you normally assume, but we are seeing cases where customers are actually asking to say, well, after hours, I expect you to contact my shift manager and I expect them to be notified as soon as anything goes wrong. And I need you to make those changes quickly. So within the technology stack, we've got to look at a level of automation. So as we hit milestones, as we hit certain events, how do we proactively send them out in a level of clearness to the customer to ensure that what we're doing is really right and it's also tailored to your message, to your particular customer and what they're actually getting. So as simple as a phone delivery, how does the customer want to receive that, and what's the best way to make sure that if they have to be there for that delivery to sign for it, how do we give them a level of simple instructions to make sure they're there, they're available, and they're ready to accept it, and they also know what they need to do? Seems really simple, but when you deal with certain postal carriers, certain delivery companies, it may be quite complex, depending on the process that's involved for them to actually accept that particular order. The media as well becomes a really interesting thing in terms of how do we really communicate something. So when something goes really pear-shaped or if something changes, we've got to be really clear to make sure that we have a level of communication that is either through one channel or through multiple channels. We've also got to make sure it's relevant to the overall customer base. So in the B2B space, media may work, news channels may work, but personalized emails and personalized SMSs / push notifications are far more relevant because they actually resonate better with the B2B and they actually understand where they're coming from and what's going on. Coming from who and what in your business is extremely important to make sure that they're signing off on it in the right manner and in the right time. Processes. So this is one I talk to a lot of customers about in terms of how do you communicate when something goes wrong? We can communicate proactively really, really well in all sunny day scenarios. We can automate, the technology works really well. As each milestone's hit, we do send out the welcome pack. We send out notifications to say your appointment's on this date, contact us if you need certain things. Those things are really, really great, really simple, and can be automated really easily right the way through most technology stacks, and then also through processes that can be well defined. Where we run into a lot of challenges on working through with a lot of customers is around fallout. So the communication, especially when it comes to fallouts, can be quite complicated. And when we talk to customers about what do you do in these scenarios, they often don't, one, know about the fallout, but then number two, how do they work that through with the customer to make sure that they're aware of what's going on and what are their impacts? Some of the key challenges we look at with these particular things come back to process. They come back to the ability to say, well, do we have a template or do we know what the communication should be available for this? And in that process, especially with a fallout, there generally isn't a template ready to go. And there's a process where actually we've got to send that communication through a whole different set of teams to get it approved before we can send it to the customer, knowing something went wrong. Now, that could be as simple as the infrastructure is just not ready to go and it's caused a fallout, and it's also going to cause a delay. Now, because that's not part of the communication that's already been approved, the process internally means that marketing potentially may have to draw it up and create it. Then we also have to get that through our legal team or before we get it to the customer, which could take us a week or two. Now, at the heart of that, the customer still doesn't know what's going on, and the customer's still expecting that service in a couple of weeks' time. And we've just eaten 2 weeks of that time pretty quickly because we've had to follow our own internal processes just to have a communication ready. It may have never happened before, but we haven't prepared for it within the processes and also within our general communications. The same is with delays. So delays are far more common than most people think. Customers are usually okay with delays, but they want to know early enough. And the reason why they want to know early enough, it's not to basically yell at you or complain about it. It's actually so they can prepare their own business. So if they're preparing for technicians to be on site, they're remodeling, or your particular service is dependent on the launch of another business, then it's really, really important that we communicate those delays proactively and very simply, but also transparent. So if we do have a delay and it's completely out of your control, explain that to them. Allow them to understand what the challenges are and what you're doing to help them go through it. It sounds simple, it sounds very easy to do, but it's often one that a lot of carriers that I work with struggle to do, because in that automated set of communications that are going out, they don't feel very transparent. They also feel very generic. So in terms of where we have challenges like a fallout or a delay, it's extremely important that we become transparent, and we also make it personable to them to say we understand it and these are all the things that we can do and that are in our control. Customers they won't respond being really happy about it, but they also won't respond being extremely negative about it. What they will measure you on and what they will evaluate you on is about how confident you were and what you're doing to help them and how well you understood them as we go through it. People and culture. Now, this is one we talk about in quite a few different scenarios. We also look at it in very different ways in terms of your people as a whole become very, very important to the overall communication to your customers. It's a consistent approach that needs to be looked at, but it's also how do we foster a level of service and communication to our customers to ensure that when we are communicating to them, it's in a consistent manner, a transparent manner, but then everyone's looking at everything from the same view. So it's ensuring that we do give them a full view of what's going on and that we are empowering us people, especially the customer facing people, with the right information and with a level of transparency that they can communicate with customers. So it's more about being really, really clear about what they should and should not communicate with customers. There is always an element of things that you cannot tell customers, and we understand that. But it's also about giving them a level to say, this is what you can tell them, and this is how you give them a level of assurance as we go forward. Breaking down those barriers in terms of having to go through legal and marketing do make things a lot more easier for people, and being able to allow them to have a natural conversation and then natural emails makes it a lot easier for them to also give your customers a great experience as we go forward. But also setting up some common goals. Now, a lot of carriers that I do work with, especially the larger ones, do have this really well defined. So they have a set of NPS goals, but then also communication goals in terms of how they communicate to customers, and an element of how do they keep things positive, but then also real. Some of them have measures within their business to say that when they do communicate and when they are working with particular customers or any customer, that this is how you're going to be measured, and this is the particular criteria that could be tied to your bonus or could be tied to commissions. But it also allows the organization as a whole to pull in the same direction, and making sure that when we do interact with customers, we interact with them and we communicate with them in an extremely consistent manner that is aligned to the business goals and business outcomes. Having that disjointed and having that in a very mixed manner does end up giving your customer different experiences, but it also leads to confusion and then also a level of trust issues between you and the customer. And you end up isolating to one person within the company that they want to work with and deal with all the time, which is not healthy and also lends itself to a lot of challenges in the future. So pulling this all together, how do we actually meet our customers' expectations with a level of ease and also success? So technology is a tool and it can help us really, really well, but it's not the be all and end all. It is a tool and it's there to help us be successful and make sure that we deliver to the outcomes that we really want to achieve with our customers, but do it in a way that doesn't cost us having a one-to-one ratio with a person, but then allow us to also give our customers different mediums to work with us. Now, some of those impacts is, we can win more deals by being more proactive. So communication around promotions, it sounds really simple, but understanding your customers in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing business, and then communicating with them around key things that do impact their business, key things that could help them, and also then lending themselves to the deals and promotions that could be with them, helps you also guide you through and increase your pipeline naturally, because they're comfortable and they're also reading through the communications that you're actually providing them, as opposed to sporadic ones that are just not relevant to them. And you're really hoping they just open that email, which happened to have a good deal in it. Predictive communication. This is one I've talked to a lot of customers about in terms of what is predictive communication and why is it important, especially to the B2B market? So predictive communication is a level of communication where you are proactively predicting some things that could impact some of your B2B customers. So for example, if you are working on a tower that happens to encompass a few of your B2B customers, being really clear and proactive and predicting there could be some outages in that area or there could be some impacts, proactively communicating to them and predicting what could happen is extremely important and transparent. So proactively messaging and emailing or broadcasting to these customers allows you to then have a level of transparency with them, but then will also naturally reduce the number of calls coming into your call center, because the individual or the business knows what could potentially impact them. They also can be prepared then for any impacts to their own business. So using your technology proactively allows them to see things, but then also predicting what some of those impacts could be and being transparent with them allows those businesses to prepare for any challenges that they may face. This is also the same within your delivery side of things. So predicting what could happen with an iPhone launch. So for example, with an iPhone coming out, we all know that pre-orders are extremely exciting and they're also extremely busy. So predicting and sending proactive text messages to your customers saying, today's the launch day, we predict that potentially you're going to receive your device in the afternoon. Please make sure you're available. And here is the process to make sure you're signing for it. That sort of notification is extremely enlightening for a lot of customers, because then they didn't know that they had to be in the office or available to sign for it, but they can also plan their day to make sure that it's in the afternoon as opposed to the morning, which allows them and helps them and gives them a better experience. The technology side of things has changed over the years we touched on earlier. Now, supporting your business and going through those changes is also important to make sure that you support different mediums. So as new businesses evolve and as the market starts to change, a lot of businesses are expecting that you can support multiple mediums of communication. So it could be a case of formal communication still comes via letters or via email if they're a bit more modern. But then certain updates, they could just want by text message or push notifications, and different mediums that you may be supporting within your business to ensure that they're kept up to date. Now, with that, you also need to think about a 360 view within your business. So ensuring that you're logging those letters, ensure you're logging those SMSs and those particular emails, and providing that in a solution that gives you a full 360 view of the customer to people in your business that may interact with them. So as the account manager, you talk to your customers, you will have frequent meetings with them, and you'll probably have frequent phone calls and the occasional text message exchange. But then if that particular customer calls into your call center, they should have a log of those formal emails that have gone in to say, this is where you're at with your delivery, this is where you're at with your outage or your problem or your fault or your ticket. So then everyone can see exactly where they're at and who to interact with. The other is around any push notifications or any key notifications that go out around any incidents happening in the area that they should be aware of, which they may not have seen or may not been aware of, and they've called into the call center. But you can refer back to them quite simply and easily to make sure the customer is aware and they're comfortable with what they've received. The other is around reducing your rework. So technology is a tool. It isn't the savior for absolutely everything. It is there to help you reduce the amount of rework that you need to do. So being proactive with everything that we've just gone through is extremely important, but then also having that ability to look at those processes and look at the overall ecosystem that you're working in will reduce the rework completely. There's nothing worse than communicating with a customer, being extremely proactive, but your call center doesn't know about it. So what ends up happening is that particular call center agent takes a call from your customer who didn't see the email because they're behind on them or they haven't reviewed them yet, and is complaining about a particular incident that's happened to their business. And they go through all of the triage and all of the troubleshooting only to find out that, hang on a minute, this has all been done and already been logged with the network as a problem, and they're looking into it, and we're expecting an ETA of a resolve within a couple of hours. Not only have you reworked all of the triage, all of that work again, but you've also wasted a lot of the customer's time as well as your call center agent's time going through that, instead of giving them that visibility to say, hey, we're aware of your problem. There is an email that's been sent to you today at 4:25. Can you check that you've received it? If you haven't, let me resend it to you again, or let's go through it together. It's a very different discussion, and it also helps with that communication to make sure that we're not overcomplicating things and reworking things that we don't really need to look at. So people and process, and keeping it focused within the technology. So technology is the tool that we need to look at in terms of making sure that we can enable this, so we don't have to have those really, really tight ratios between people and that one-to-one management of everything that happens with a particular customer, whether it's a fault or delivery. The resource within the technology becomes extremely important, but ensuring that you have the processes inside it is just as important. So making sure that your team has a level in terms of, this is all of the processes that we need in the delivery side of things, including all the templates that are required via email, SMS, push, whichever mediums you're looking at, and they can be personalized by either the system itself or by a particular agent triggering those and sending them off to the right people. Also being able to capture and change those contacts quickly and easily is something that should be part of the process to ensure that when we do those things, that we are keeping the customer up to date. The 360 view is also part of the overall process we've got to look at in terms of ensuring that who has access and who can communicate with the customer. So using the technology to really give you that view, but then also how do we keep that consistent messaging and the frequency right with your customers is just as important than communicating as a whole. The one thing I can't stress with a lot of customers is about being proactive. So working through the proactive side of things, it does sound extremely easy, and it should be, but it can be hard for a lot of carriers because they don't know how to be proactive, because there's quite a lot of things that are outside of their control. But that doesn't mean that you can't communicate with your customers in a simple manner to say, we understand what's going on, or we are aware of something. Simply acknowledging and working through that is extremely important for your customers to know what's going on. Even telling them and being proactive to say there's delays within the postal network because of Christmas is welcomed by most businesses, because then they're aware of certain things and they can plan around it. And proactive communication sets you apart from a lot of your other experiences that customers are going through. Because one of the key things that we seem to forget as well is a lot of the telco customers that we work with also are dealing with a whole bunch of other suppliers that could be letting them down, that are not as transparent, and standing out between them allows them to not only remember us, but also treat us in a way that is more respectful. And then also means that they're also going to look at us for further things for their business and recommending us to other people within their ecosystem as well. So as we touched on in our last webinar, we talked about CloudSense's Telco One. Now, Telco One, it's not a communications engine, but it does allow for communication to become a lot easier through the platform and through your journey, especially the buying journey with your customers. Now, that buying journey may not just be for new, it can be for re-signs, or it could be simple for changes. We know that changes can be extremely difficult, especially when you're looking at changing technologies, but also timing certain things and making sure that communication is extremely proactive, because there could be situations where one part goes down and the other doesn't work. And we really need to focus on how do we really communicate all the way through. So within Telco One, we've built in multiple points of interactions that can be configured and tailored for your customers' requirements, but more so for your business process requirements to ensure that you empower your people, but then also have a full view that can write back to your CRM in a very simple manner, ensuring that we're logging everything that we're talking about. So right the way from when you introduce yourself as the carrier for the customer. So this could be a case of you've just met the customer, you've now entered them as a lead into the CRM that you're using. You can now simply send the customer a brief about you as the account manager, but you can also trigger off some key things that you've talked about that you would send them as additional information. So that could be as simple as some network information, some key things around certain products and services that you may have discussed. Then we go into some of the key functionalities that Telco One has delivered around quick quoting. Now, the ability to send a quick quote, which could be budgetary, etc., is a level of communication that goes to the customer, but also has a set of milestones that you want to measure and work through with them. So that quick quote may have a validity period of maybe 2 to 3 days. So sending them a set of reminders and a set of communication, but then also other collateral that could go with it is also extremely important in that process. And allowing that to be processed is really, really simple through Telco One. Then we go through our natural processes that we're really familiar with, which is the full configuration processes. So ensuring that we build that configuration relevant to the customer based on their needs. And we go through some of the quoting things that we went through last week. And then also around giving them additional details in terms of what are the differences between the different products that they could be looking at. And then at the same time is giving them a level of communication to say, hey, we need some extra details around your enrichment side. So that could be as simple as we need to know your numbers, delivery addresses, and even your IP address ranges, which are just things that can be added right the way through to the end, but we're giving them a level of communication to say, hey, these are the things we need, and we're proactively going to be asking you for them from now right the way through till before we deliver your service, and we'll keep you updated as you make those changes proactively on your side. As we go through, and depending on the products and services you're selling the customer, through the platform, you can schedule appointments and automate those to be changed for the customer, but then sending out a level of reminders when you want them to be going out. So whether you want to send a reminder the day before, but then also maybe a week before to remind the customer to say, hey, you've got a technician coming on site and you need to be available for them. And you also need to have a clear set of instructions for them so they can access your comms room. And if there's any safety things that they need to go through, can you please make them available? That's a level of transparency that allows for faster communication and faster service for your customers, but also for yourself as well. At the same time, we look at quotes. They need to be fast. They also need to be quicker, and they need to be turned things around. So communicating the customer in terms of what version they're up to, or which ones are cancelled or which ones are not valid anymore, is also part of the platform that we support. Once we create the order and the confirmation side of things, communicating to the customer about what is next. So through the platform, we can also automate the welcome pack, which is simple: welcome to the carrier. These are the things that you expect next. And it could be also introducing the delivery manager or the delivery management team that could be part of your business that you want to take forward. And it's a welcoming side of things to the overall side. And then coupled with that is a level of full visibility around the delivery. So as the delivery is going through and we hit certain milestones, or we don't hit them and we hit fallout and we hit delays, those templates can be built into the platform as well and triggered in a personal way to the customer, all while keeping that full 360 view, ensuring that the customer is aware of things. Now, some of the automation things that we do have built in and we work with other partners with is also when there's certain events that cause issues. So if there's a outage or if your particular router dies and a new one needs to be ordered, that order can be placed by another system, but then the CloudSense Telco One can automate that whole process, including the communications going out to your customers to say, we noticed there's a problem. We've also ordered your new router. It's expected on this date. We'll also organize a technician for you. Please look out for a call from Joe from our delivery center. She'll be contacting you in the next 24 hours. We were predictive, we're proactive, and we've also delivered a great communication and a great service to the customer without them having to do anything with regards to their overall service. Now, we've covered a lot today, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but I'll hand back to you, Ed, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Vish. Yeah, so there are a few questions that we can get to. Here's one. How do we build some sort of two-way communication into our models? For example, when a customer changes their organization and we need to update contact details, feedback that we're getting is that this is hard. Do you have any suggestions?
It's a common one that I get faced with quite a lot. It's one that becomes a challenge in terms of, most carriers say, well, you should have a really close relationship with your customers. So therefore, if there's anything that does come back, what do we do with it? And, how do we really fill that in? So in terms of those sorts of things, my suggestion to a lot of customers is look at your self-serve side of things to allow customers to update their preferred contact lists. The other is also, and that can be done via the CRM or it can be done by multiple channels. That's probably the most cleanest way of doing it. A lot of carriers have taken security and privacy to a level which is quite compliant, and it is challenging to manage. The other is, as an account manager, probably a level of hygiene is to proactively go through that with the customer every quarter, just to make sure certain things are up to date, especially when dealing with B2B customers. It's really, really important that you do keep those levels of communication, those formal meetings in place so you can keep that up to date. And that's also with the mediums in terms of how you want certain things to be communicated to your customers.
Hey, thank you. Another question here. Our communication strategy seems to be okay, but we struggle to get penetration as customers receive the communication but still flood our call center. Any thoughts on that?
Quite a common one. And a lot of that, it's one that we do hear a fair bit. My advice to a lot of customers is have a look at how often are you communicating it and what is also your processes and the technologies that you're actually using for the communication. Often either the customer hasn't seen, for example, the email because they're not aware that you're actually emailing them. The other is the number you have for the SMS may not be right. And it sounds quite simple, but then if they are calling into your call centers, part of those processes could be around just really validating how we should be interacting with them. So you can't avoid them calling in, but how to slow that down is about asking some very simple questions within the call center interaction, which is, hey, you've called in today. We've also sent you an email. Can I just confirm what your email address is? And is this a method that you would prefer? And it could be a case of they change their options. They could have just received a new phone with a bigger screen on it, so they're okay with SMSs and they prefer that method. But customers generally do change, quite frequently depending on the communication. But they're also not aware, so hence why they are calling in. So making that process within the business and then also ensuring they're on the right technology is extremely important as well.
Okay, thank you, Vish. Well, we've hit the 45-minute mark now, so I think we'll have to wrap it up now. Apologies to anyone whose questions we didn't get to. We will attempt to answer them shortly after the end of the webinar. But for now, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for attending. We hope you all found it useful. Just a reminder that this is the second in a three-part series of webinars that we're doing. The next episode is this time next week, where the topic will be delivery. So I hope to see a lot of you back then, and I wish you all a good day. Thank you.